police officers are human beings, and I mean, when you're being attacked like that, or at least you're perceived of being attacked, it does create some issues and some problems. But I think that we all need to recognize that there are some changes that need to be made. I mean, we can't look at it from a defensive posture. How do we move forward? How do we create an environment where we're on the same page? There's only one issue, and that is creating safe neighborhoods, but also those neighborhoods where the people in it have a sense and feeling of justice and fairness.
That was Charles Ramsey. He is co-chair for President Obama's task force on 21st century policing, and he was speaking, as you could see there, on Meet the Press just today, discussing how law enforcement might move forward in a non-defensive way, he says, after these tragedies. After the protests in St. Paul and Baton Rouge escalating last night, though, with those arrests, as we've reported, of over 200 people in total in both cities, the anger continues to grow, and the images, of course, are spread. Joining me now is former Baltimore police officer and former chief of staff to the Department of Justice Community Policing Services, Rob Weinhold. I want to ask you first your view of where we are today as Americans say, gosh, here are these tragedies. Are we more divided than ever, or are we simply paying attention for good reason to big events, but that doesn't tell us where we are as a national community, if you will?
I think the appearance is that there's a lot of division, and I think there is as it's being broadcast across the world. But the truth of the matter is that virtually everyone I know, and the overwhelming majority of people in this country, want a safe place to live, work, and raise a family. So I think there's much more that we have in common than we have that might divide us. That being said, I think community policing is extremely important. I think there's a misnomer that community policing means that you're soft on crime, and I think police departments should make no apology for arresting those who hurt others or destroy property. But I often have said, and it's very, very true, policing is a relational profession, not a transactional profession. And the best way to do that is outside of the police car, in neighborhoods, making sure that you're building trust on a daily basis. And officers and departments across the country, they can be very much a quality of life organization.
Let's get into it a little bit, because everything you just said makes sense. And I think a casual listener would say, sure, everything there we should do. But there are disagreements here. You talk about getting out of the car. The FBI director, Jim Comey, has suggested without data that the fact that these videos are being made makes officers want to stay in the car. That's something that he has disagreed with the Obama administration about. And so there is some real tension here of not just saying, oh, it'd be nice to patrol communities, but rather there are parts of law enforcement that feel that they're getting a bum rap. These videos make them out to be more reckless or quote-unquote racially divisive than they are. And then there are these communities that feel they're actually under attack by the people that are supposed to protect them.
Look, officers are ordinary men and women thrust into extraordinary circumstances each and every day. It's a very, very difficult profession. And frankly, I think being an officer today is more difficult than at any point in history. But it doesn't change the fact that you have...
Well, Rob, why is it more difficult now if crime's not as high as other points in history?
Because we're in the digital age. I mean, when officers get out of their vehicles and 15 people pull out an iPhone and want to record everything that's occurring, that changes the dynamic. In theory, it shouldn't change how an officer conducts his or her duty, but the fact is they're human beings, and I think that has changed the equation.
Can I push you on that, Rob? Can I push you on that?
Yeah.
Let me push you on that.
Absolutely.
One response to that is, well, there are a lot of other areas where people who have some public responsibility are on the record, are accountable, whether that's transcripts in court or video transmission or a body camera, which the government puts on. I cover these issues, and I totally understand when officers say, hey, I'm being judged by 8 seconds. It doesn't show you the before, the after, and the week before. I totally get that. But when you say the idea that any video is a threat to them, why should it be? If there's enough video to tell the whole story and they're acting lawfully, won't that be good for them? Won't that evidence help them?
Well, first and foremost, I'm not saying that any video is a threat to them. In fact, I'm a firm believer in transparency, proper supervision, and accountability. So I think that there are cameras, whether they're body cameras or anyone else recording a situation, is a very, very good thing and a positive step for law enforcement. But it doesn't change the dynamic that when officers go out and they patrol these streets, that one of their interactions may be up for public scrutiny immediately. And I think that does change the dynamic. But again, make no mistake about it, it's a very, very difficult profession. It's unpredictable. I think all of us are feeling a sense of fear and sadness and frustration, but the dialogue has to continue. And not just, I'm not saying that, a firm policy or legislation or a fantastic political speech, that's not where it's going to change in the immediate sense. What can happen tonight? What can happen tomorrow? Agencies need to get out in their communities and change the dynamic between communities and their police departments, person by person, house by house, block by block, outside of the patrol car. And frankly, I think communities have a responsibility as well. When there's an interaction between an officer, whether it's a car stop or a field interview or some other event that occurs, the goal is to make sure that transaction, so to speak, occurs and everyone arrives safely on the other side of it. So the old adage of comply and then complain if you feel there's a need to, I believe is very much alive here.
And briefly, with our 20 seconds, a question I posed earlier to a senator in the earlier segment. Is it a problem that the Texas police officers and the DART officers were essentially outgunned because the assailant had a bigger gun, or is that just life and police have to live with it?
I think that when you have motivated people who are intending to injure others, whether it's a knife or gun or some other object, officers are always going to have to deal with that. Clearly, there's a gun debate in this country. It's going to continue for decades to come. But at the end of the day, we have to make sure that enforcement, prevention, and treatment are working in harmony to make sure that citizens reduce crime and improve the quality of life in their neighborhoods. Again, everyone wants a safe place to live, work, and raise a family in this country.
Former Baltimore police officer, former DOJ Director Rob Weinhold, appreciate you giving your expertise today.
My pleasure.
Outside Dallas Police Headquarters, growing memorial there for these fallen officers. We're going to take next up an in-depth look at what is the heavy lift and the challenges of trying to get